Okay, so welcome to our conversation about the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. This is a guide for new authors or authors that are in the early career and who are thinking of publishing with the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. And what we're trying to do is to give you some information to think about what's different about the journal, what to expect, and what kind of things you would want from a journal like ours and why this may be the journal for you. And with us, we've got Graham Miller, who's the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Surrey, and one of the two editors of the Journal of Sustainable Tourism.
Thank you, Javier.
So it's a pleasure to be able to have a conversation about the journal, because this is one of the journals that essentially has been very important for me over the years in my work on sustainability. But for the people who don't know so much about the journal, can you tell us about what the aims of the journal are?
Sure. So the journal is now beyond its 25th year, and the aims are still in many ways true to its original, which it's about promoting sustainability, but through the tourism industry. So it's the connection between tourism and sustainability. With the recent Sustainable Development Goals, that's given us a framework for the aims of the journal. So we now very clearly align the journal with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What we're not about is promoting the sustainability of the tourism industry itself. And so that's an important distinction that sometimes goes missing. What we're about is promoting sustainability for the sake of sustainable development, but using tourism as the vehicle for that. So really sustainability is the key.
Very interesting, and of course it's more than semantics, isn't it, that difference? So besides that, what would you look for in a journal or in an article that would be submitted to you?
So the key things that we're looking for with any journal paper is the significance, the originality and the rigor of the paper. Those are the standard that really the different paper review systems in different countries are using, and a lot of journals are using. So is the paper significant? Does it make a significant contribution? But crucially, does it make a contribution to theory as opposed to practice, or simply to knowledge? So we get a lot of papers submitted that make a contribution to knowledge, but don't make a theoretical contribution, and that's an important distinction. Is the paper making an original contribution? Is it saying something new, something novel? And that really goes to how interesting is the paper. So we have now nearly 500 papers a year submitted to the journal. We can publish less than 100 of those.
Right.
So that's not too bad, but it does mean that the paper has to be interesting. And I want to publish interesting papers. And then the last of those components, is it rigorous? So are the methods that are being used rigorous methods? Is it more than just a student survey? Is it more than an internet survey? Is it more than a single destination case study? So if it can prove those things, significant originality, rigor, and is it interesting? Is this something that people are going to want to pick up and read and indeed cite? Then it's got a good chance of being published.
Yeah, and I suspect most people that submit a paper, they genuinely believe that it meets those three requirements, because otherwise why would you spend the time? So what would be the most common mistakes that you see in papers submitted?
So probably the most significant, the most common failing is that it doesn't meet the criteria of the journal.
Right.
And so it addresses the sustainability of tourism. It might be a very looking at tourist satisfaction, for example. So it thinks about what are the implications of this for the tourist rather than sustainability. It thinks about the financial sustainability and takes an overly profit-driven approach to. And we accept that financial sustainability is important, but it's not the totality of sustainability. So failing to address the remit of the journal is probably the main failing. Poor scholarship, sloppy scholarship is a problem. We have we make a lot of use of desk reject through the really just to keep the process moving, because if we put 500 papers through to review, we would collapse the system. Everybody needing every paper needing 3 reviews. So we do use a lot of desk rejects. So if the paper has poor scholarship to it, that doesn't help the paper's chances for sure. Of course, failing to be significant, original, rigorous. We do see a lot of single case study papers that are unable to demonstrate what the relevance of this to the wider audience is. And so if you can't show why what you found in your single case study is important to a bigger audience, then again it's probably going to fail. So we see a lot of papers that are about more the place than the concept.
Yeah.
And if the paper fails that test, it's probably going to get rejected.
Okay, that's a good point. So can you tell us a bit more about the process of reviewing? You've just mentioned the desk rejection. So what would I expect if I was submitting an article there? How long would it take? What kind of feedback could I get?
So papers will be submitted. We try within 3 to 4 weeks to go back to the authors, and the paper will either go to a full review or it will be desk rejected.
Okay.
We would love to get that quicker, and to sometimes a paper can come in on a Friday and I can turn it around on a Monday, and it's back to you. It might be a few days. Other times of the year with different pressures, but normally within 4 weeks people will know if it's gone out to review or it's back to the author.
Okay.
If it goes out for full review, we have at least one of our editorial board will review the paper, and then at least 2 other reviewers will review the paper. So every paper that goes to full review will have been read by one of either James or I, the co-editors, by an editorial board member, and 2 other reviewers. So when the feedback does come back, it should be good, comprehensive feedback that comes back. But that process can take a period of time, depending on how specific the topic of the paper. That might take 6 months to go in a worst case scenario. Best case scenario, it might take 8 weeks to get through that process. Then at that point, it's really down to the author how quickly the paper proceeds. So the comments will go back to the author. They've got to revise the paper. That comes back again. We tend not to send the paper out for a second review, but that will depend on how helpful the author is in helping me to understand what changes they've made against the reviewer's comments. So very well laid out. This is what the reviewer said, this is what we did, and here it is in the paper, allows me to go through that in a much better way. Otherwise, that's a really difficult process to go through. That's a long stage. And then that we may iterate 2 or 3 times through that process. But broadly, if a paper is going to be published, I think last year every paper that was published spent less than 12 months from start to finish. If it's desk rejected, it's a 3-4 week journey. If it's published, it's a 12-month journey. But it's that up to a year, I think we can get most things through.
And you mentioned earlier on the Sustainable Development Goals and how those are now guiding the aims of the journal. So obviously this is quite broad still. And when you're now looking at special issues or looking at focusing on specific topics, how do you go about deciding what the priority may be of the moment and how to concentrate on a particular topic?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that James and I have talked about a lot, is do we simply act as receive the things that authors are interested in, or do we try to be more proactive about inviting special issues on certain topics? And we're taking a combination of those at the moment. We don't want to feel like we necessarily know best and that we can be entirely deterministic about the special issues, but we've identified a special issue that we want to run every year for the next 3 years, and that's with Dr. Debbie Hopkins, who's at University of Oxford in their Transport Studies unit. So every year we're going to have a special issue on sustainable transport, and that's done deliberately to try to bring transport studies people into the journal, because we've felt that has been underrepresented in sustainability and sustainable tourism. So hopefully that will bring that audience in. we are keen to use the Sustainable Development Goals as a way of saying that the journal's published very little on tourism and the marine environment, or even tourism and poverty to a great extent. And some of the SDGs are really not represented very well.
Gender.
In agenda as another topic in the journal. So by identifying, here's a special issue that we would like to run, going out to authors and saying, would you be a guest editor for us with a special issue on this topic? We can attract papers and begin the debate. And you know, the special issues that you've done have been very successful in terms of the number of papers that you attracted, and citations and some of those things. You know, we know that special issues cite very well because it's a nice collection of them. So when you put out your CSR special issue, you got a really good level of response to that, didn't you?
Yes, so I've now been involved in 2 special issues, one in marketing for sustainability, and in that one we mainly invited people to submit papers, and we had about 20 people that we knew from the track record that published on this topic. And then on the second special issue was on corporate social responsibility, and we went more broadly, and we just went to the wider community. And we got about 50 papers submitted for that, of which obviously there was a varied quality. And as you said, some of them required more help than others. But it was really interesting to get that broader range of people also saying, well, I want to have a go at this and I have something to say. And it's complex to be inclusive, but yeah, it worked well.
And so I completely forgot the question I was going to ask there. Let's start again. The special issue that you did with the 2 that you've done, how long did they take from start to finish?
So it was about 18 months. And I have to say, as somebody who hadn't done this before and who'd always been, as an author, submitting to a journal, I found it very rewarding, and I learned a huge amount, through going through that process. And I thought it made me a much better author in the future as a result, because I could really see from the other side, from the point of view of the special issue editor, what is required, how the process works, and the complexities of having to take some very difficult and sometimes uncomfortable decisions about a paper that may have potential, but you're thinking, but it doesn't really deliver maybe today. And therefore, how do I work with those authors to get the best out of what they have to offer at this stage?
And it identified authors that we hadn't come across before, that we'd never seen these people
and
before.
That was great, actually. That was really exciting, and you could also see how different papers coming in would clearly help one another. And then the ability of actually saying to people, these other papers going through at the same time, and they have this thing, that they can offer, and helping people kind of building on each other's ideas and finding ways that afterwards, as a result of the special issue, these people have talked to one another and they're looking for things together. And I genuinely feel that, particularly on the marketing one is now finished, we've been able to move further forward. And we now have a community of people who have talked about related issues at the same time. And as a result of this, we'll be able to make a leapfrog, change on a subject that until now had somehow been underrepresented.
It makes a nice network of people, doesn't it? And so I think that's why we get the higher citations for the special issue papers, because they're all collected together, and you just get that critical mass of papers on a topic. The special issues you did weren't connected to a conference.
No, they weren't. And we chose not to, because in a way then we found that you could be potentially limiting to the audience that couldn't go to that conference. And also conferences tend to be more geographically focused, so you then get a disproportionate amount of papers from one part of the world, and that was not the point. Having said that, you could start with a conference, I suppose, and you could then make sure you broaden it out and you invite people from elsewhere.
I think that's one of the common failings we have, is people feel that they've got a conference, they would like a special issue that goes with it. And if you look at the number of papers, the 50 papers down to a special issue, you do need a lot of papers to get down to a special issue. And I don't think conferences provide enough papers for you. Putting a call out on a topic, if it's a good topic, attracts more papers than a conference ever can, I think. unless it's a really big conference.
That's right, and there is a danger that you're using the call for papers or the link to the journal as a way of trying to attract more people to attend your conference. And I understand why you may want to use that strategy, but from the point of view of the person doing the editing of the journal, you don't want to find yourself saddled with a small number of papers and then feeling that you need to accept papers that aren't to the level of an ABS 3-star journal that Josh now is.
Yeah. So the special issues for us are a really important part of the journal. It's a way, I think, that we can attract papers on topics that we think are important. It is a way that we can respond from what academics think are important as well. It's a way we can reach out to new audiences, and we're really keen to receive ideas from authors, people who want to be guest editors for the journal, such as yourself. So
great.
Thank you.
This is just a brief summary, essentially, of what we have to offer in the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. Thank you to Graham Miller to tell us more about what the journal has to offer. We haven't been able to introduce James Hyam, the second editor of the journal, who's at the University of Otago, but it was kind of difficult to do that from the distance. But it seems to me that we have explained sufficiently both to early career authors as well as to people who may consider actually putting themselves forward for running a special issue in terms of what the journal has to offer.